Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith again. Like I said, trying to give you guys more content and be more consistent with my channel and all that fun stuff. A big part of it is, early on in this year, there hasn't been a ton going on in MMA, meaning not a ton of huge cards, a lot of fight night stuff. I'll do something about the fight night this weekend because I think it's comparatively good. But to keep you guys going, right, with content, I know I talked to my attorney, Patrick Donahue, about the whole Cain Velasquez thing. Appreciate all the responses on that one. Pretty reasonable stuff for the most part. You guys are pretty good fans. Obviously, tough situation for everybody. But getting back to MMA, considering I'm going to talk about the card this weekend later on in the week, probably on Wednesday, want to make one of my all-time lists for you guys that are fun to do. And this one is, we did it on my SiriusXM show and got a ton of great responses, so I'm going to do it here on my channel. But it's the most feared fighters of all time. What does that mean? It isn't necessarily the best fighter, right? Some of these people will be on the all-time great list somewhere, especially in their respective weight classes. But these were the fighters that people didn't want to fight, that mentally seemed to have an incredible edge over their opposition almost every time because there was a fear factor. You didn't want to fight this person because they were going to hurt you or they were way aggressive. And of course, I have different examples and different styles. But this is my list of most feared fighters of all time, not in any particular order. If there are names that you think I missed, and I tried to get ones that maybe you guys hadn't heard of or weren't that well known, let me know in the comment section. But we're starting off with one of my favorites of all time, period. Melvin Manhoef, Dutch kickboxer, fought in Bellator later on in his career, but really did his best work in Japan. Did some great work in Strikeforce. His fight with Robbie Lawler is a classic. But this guy was 185 pounds-ish, right? Depending on... He could actually probably have fought at 170 if he'd really felt like it. But blew guys out of the water. One of the most fearsome kickboxers I have ever seen in professional MMA. He used to walk in with a dog collar, and his coach would lead him into the ring like a wild animal. But unbelievable power. This is a guy who knocked out Mark Hunt in 18 seconds with a single punch. And he's a middleweight. Crushed him. Flattened Mark Hunt with one punch. The problem with Melvin, if you look at the Robbie Lawler fight, it's a great example. He fought him in Strikeforce, was literally kicking Robbie Lawler to death. Robbie couldn't walk. He was limping. All Melvin had to do was stay with the leg kick, stay on the outside, and it was over. Robbie was about to collapse. He went in for the kill. Robbie threw a desperation overhand left and knocked him out. That was kind of the problem with Melvin. He was so ferocious that even in fights where if he could have stayed a little more tactical, he would have won. He would go for it, and it wouldn't always work out for him. Obviously, he had trouble with the takedown because he was a striker first before anything. But my God, a fearsome dude. Dennis Kang knocked him out in 1 minute of one round. I remember it was Gegard Mousasi who called him the Mike Tyson of MMA. He just scared the crap out of you, and he was so ferocious with his attacks that he beat a lot of really good guys. Also, he tended to fight out of his weight class a lot. That happened a lot more in Japan back in his day. And so a lot of times, even though, once again, not even a big 185-pounder, he's fighting Mark Hunt. He's just fighting big dudes that were way out of his weight class. But one of the most fearsome fighters I've ever seen, Melvin Manhoef. Huge fan. Love him to death. Moving on, let's go with, once again, this is no particular order. He would probably maybe be, if this were in order, maybe number one on the list as far as intimidation factors go. The axe murderer, Wanderlei Silva. I don't need to explain to any fan who's been around for any length of time who Wanderlei Silva is. Maybe to a new fan, I have to explain. Pride, light heavyweight champion. I don't know if they called it light heavyweight, but ferocious, vicious, took Muay Thai to a whole new level when it came to MMA. But not only that, his aggression was just unbelievably off the chain. When Kazushi Sakuraba was the Gracie Hunter and beating everybody, I remember when he fought Wanderlei, and my coach at the time, a guy named Fabiano Iha, was my grappling coach, and he goes, "Man, they can't protect him from Wanderlei." And I said, "What do you mean?" Sakuraba was beating everybody. He goes, "That guy's a different animal, man." He goes, "He's not going to try and grapple with Kazushi Sakuraba. He's not going to make it a point of pride. I'm going to submit him and use my technique. He's going to beat the crap out of him." And he did. He just housed Kazushi Sakuraba absolutely destroyed him. His best run was in Pride. In that time, by the way, he beats Guy Metzger, Dan Henderson, Kazushi Sakuraba 3 times, Kyoshi Tamura, Quentin Rampage Jackson, Ikehisa Minowa, Yuki Kondo, Quentin Jackson again, Ricardo Arona. They went 1-1, but just incredible run through Pride. By the time he went to the UFC, number 1, he was older. Number 2, he had a lot of fights under his belt. Number 3, they test in the UFC, so he was much smaller than he was in Pride. But that intimidation, the way he would, loosen up his wrist. Guys were just beaten before they ever got in there against Wanderlei. I was training with Dan Henderson when he fought Wanderlei the first time, and Wanderlei beat the crap out of Dan Henderson. Oh my God. I remember a picture of Dan Henderson curled up in the locker room on a pillow. Just crushed. Wanderlei beat the piss out of him. Incredible fighter, especially in his prime, but just intimidating beyond belief. So Wanderlei Silva for sure on the list. Next up, Rousimar Palhares. If you remember him, if you're an old enough fan to remember him, outstanding submission game, but the dude wasn't all there in the head. And I'm from the same team, kind of. He's Brazilian top team, which is an offshoot of Carlson Gracie. Carlson Gracie guys went to inform the Brazilian top team. So I know a lot of his coaches and his people. And I've heard from multiple people, he's not malicious. He's literally just, he can submit you and rip your leg off and not realize, like he's just like that. He just doesn't get it. The problem, he was kicked out of the UFC for holding on to submissions too long. That's exactly what happened. He held on to submissions too long. It was against Mike Pierce. He got a heel hook. Mike Pierce taps. Referee tries to stop him. He held on to the heel hook too long. And he got suspended and kicked out of the UFC. Same things in his fight with Jake Shields. He kept gouging his eyes. And then Jake Shields was like, what the hell's going on? And they got real chippy. Got him in a sweet Kimura. And Jake Shields, I competed against Jake Shields back in the day when we were both purple belts. And sweeps Jake Shields with this perfect Kimura and won't let go. Referee jumps on him and trying to pull him off, and it's just, he did this every freaking time he grappled. If he got a limb, he was going to rip it off. And you can tap, and the referee can be yelling and screaming. It doesn't matter. He's going to go after you anyway. I had an opportunity to train with him one time, years ago, back when he was real big. He came to my gym in Long Beach, and my coach goes, "Hey, Rousimar Palhares is here." And I was like, I wouldn't grapple with that guy. I wouldn't do it, because in ADCC, he had the same problem. He was David Avalon, I think he was grappling, and they roll out of bounds, and he keeps trying to rip his leg off. And the referee's like, dude, stop. And people are yelling, stop, and David Avalon's like, what's wrong with you, man? He's just like that. So I wouldn't trust rolling with the guy. But fearsome in that you worried about your safety fighting this guy. So he was incredibly intimidating. Nobody wanted to fight this guy back in his prime. He ended up having a pretty steep drop-off after the Jake Shields when he got suspended, I think, again for that. But he just, with all the suspensions and all the problems he had, he never really got a great run in his prime. Also, who was he fighting? And he said he thought they were greased. Nate Marquardt. He thought Nate Marquardt was greased, and he turns to the referee and goes, he's greased, and got knocked out. Like, dude, focus on what you're doing. Complain in between rounds if you think the guy's greased. And he wasn't all there. Anyway, that Rousimar Palhares, very, very feared guy because of that tendency to just do more than he should. Jose Aldo, gotta make my list. This is one of the reasons that Jose Aldo at 135 is good. He's a competent fighter. He can fight, so some pretty elite guys and do well. Of course, coming off a split decision loss to Mario Batista, lost to Merab Dvalishvili, beat Jonathan Martinez, like 135, Jose Aldo. Dude, prime 145 Jose Aldo was, oh my God, I'm scared of this dude. And the thing that really set him on fire as far as most MMA fans at the time was the Cub Swanson knockout. Now, he had been knocking guys out in the first round before that, but they weren't guys you had heard of, right? Rolando Perez was one of them. I don't remember the other guy, but knocked him out in round number 1 and just destroyed him. Then Cub Swanson, who was on a pretty good run at the time, flying knee, 8 seconds in, crushes his orbital. He falls to the ground, like holding his eye. And everyone went, oh my God, this dude is for real. That Jose Aldo, who went from there to obviously the run we know on him until Conor McGregor. Just when he fought Mike Brown, he smashed Mike Brown. And Mike Brown was really good. I'd beaten Uriah Faber twice, and he ate Mike Brown alive, just destroyed him. When he fought Uriah Faber and leg kicked him to the point where people were like, you got to, this fight's got to stop. And you could tell Jose was like, all right, I'm not going to do you like that. You can't move. So he kind of like, at a certain point, I don't want to say he was playing with him, but was, kicking on the outside, not trying to do that much. If he had just unloaded, it would have been over for Uriah. He was fast. He was vicious. He could beat you on the inside, beat you on the outside. Amazing leg kicks. Great ground game. When I trained with Novignone in Brazil, this is like a decade ago, I was trained with Novignone in Brazil in jiu-jitsu, just doing jiu-jitsu stuff. And they were like, dude, Jose's ground game is as good as his stand-up. He just never has a chance to use it because he knocks everybody out. Because he can tap out everybody. He's really, really good. But no gaps in his game, and his timing was amazing. Look at the Chad Mendes knockout. I mean, boom, off the cage, turns around, flying knee, and it's over. I mean, the guy was just fire-breathing, unbelievable. Guys were in awe of him while in the octagon with him. Like, oh my God. I remember when he fought Kenny Florian, Kenny being kind of like, had this, not deer in the headlights, but like in awe of how good he was. Jose Aldo scared the crap out of you in the octagon. He was incredible back in the day, which is why when people go, oh, he still got it. He still has some of it. Maybe you could argue most of it. He isn't that guy that I remember in his UFC run as champion. Absolutely incredible. So a feared guy. People were afraid of him. You cannot make any list like this without including Robbie Lawler. That's right, man. Robbie is one of those guys where at 170, always had one-shot power, always explosive, always really powerful. He had everything at 170. 185, there was a big step down for him. And for people that don't remember, he was in the UFC at 170, ended up fighting Evan Tanner at 185, got triangled. Released from the UFC or left the UFC. I don't know the case exactly. A long time ago. Let me look. When was it? Anyway, goes to Strikeforce. That was in 2004. Like, what was it? 21 years ago. Ends up going to Super Brawl. Ends up going to Strikeforce and kind of bouncing around 185 pounds. Wasn't the same guy at 185. Just was not. He didn't have the power. Guys could take his shot. Guys could kind of muscle him. They could use their grappling to kind of negate his power advantage and all this stuff. Goes back down to 170, comes back to UFC, and becomes the same guy again, which is so rare in this sport, where he was a feared puncher at 170. Wasn't as much at 185. You could handle his shot at 185. Goes back down to 170, goes into the UFC, and kind of like picks up right where he left off. It was amazing for me personally to see. It was like 10 years later, comes back in the UFC, and he's the man again. Ends up becoming champion, of course, you all know, defeating Johnny Hendricks and blah, 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 and his title run, and now in the UFC Hall of Fame, which he richly deserves, by the way. Just a fantastic fighter, but scary. And I want to make this caveat. Scary at 170. 85ers weren't in awe of him. 170-pounders were, because he just had this like crazy ability to check you on the chin and finish you. When he fought Tiki Gojin, if you look closely at that fight, he hits him with a slap. He hits him with an open hand, left hook, boom, and knocks him down and then finishes him with the right hand. He knocked him down with a slap. That tells you about the power Robbie Lawler had. Now, his demeanor was kind of ice cold, but it didn't have like a fearsome, like, I'm going to kill you demeanor. It was like, I do this every day. You don't scare me. To me, that's also frightening, is I'm such a pro and this is so normal to me, and then I'm not worried about you. And that's the demeanor he had. It could be intimidating. But Robbie Lawler, you can't make any list of intimidating fighters without listing Robbie Lawler. He was freaking awesome at it. All right, moving up to the heavyweights. Got to go with Cain Velasquez. He's got to make the list because he had a combination. And somebody said this, I think, on the comments for my video about Cain's sentencing. Cain didn't have a lot of one-shot power. Generally, that's true. He did take out Minotauro with one shot, but it's the idea that I've said before, that the worst feeling in combat sports is, I don't know if I have the gas to get this done. And he does. And it's terrifying, right? Getting beaten sucks and getting hit sucks, but going, oh my God, do I have the gas for this guy? That was Cain. Cain had an endless gas tank. And because he wasn't a knockout puncher, it wasn't going to be a short night for you, right? Like, oh, you're going to get hit and hit and hit and hit and hit and hit and hit. And number one, that's intimidating. Number two, that's the kind of beating that has long-term damage. If you take a one-shot knockout, it sucks. It's not fun, and it can cause permanent damage, but the long, sustained beating causes damage. Junior Dos Santos got 2 of those, where his face was a mess. He was destroyed, should have been stopped a round before in both fights. It's one of those things where Cain put a beating on you. He didn't necessarily knock you out. You saw what he did to Bigfoot Silva. It was like a guy at the bottom of a mountain, all these boulders are coming down on you. That's what it was like, right? But no one boulder's enough to kill you. And so Cain, you were going to go through the ringer against Cain. You were going to have to sustain a butt whooping for at least a couple of rounds. And that is what the guy did to you. He just destroyed you, right? But it was like this, more of a grind kind of destruction. It was like, oh my God, get off me. Even when he finished guys in one round, it wasn't a one-shot deal. He got on top of him and boom, 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 boom. It was terrible, right? Cain could do things physically other heavyweights couldn't do. And yeah, he had a frightening demeanor too, right? He did. He didn't look at you like you guys were friends. So I got to go with the intimidation factor. Cain Velasquez, another heavyweight. Francis Ngannou's got to make this list for almost the opposite reason. He hit you once and it was night-night. Big, huge. It was like fighting a wall. And we all remember the Overeem knockout. We made him look like a Pez dispenser, right? His face just pointing at the ceiling. Overeem, an incredibly well-rounded heavyweight, could do a lot of different things. And Ngannou just one shot at him, he was done. I mean, massive hands. Still has a record, I believe, at the PI for punching power. The guy could just hit like a freight train. And his demeanor, I mean, he's generally a nice guy, but still, Jesus, his finishing ability made him something to fear. And the second fight with Stipe Miocic, the amount of improvement he had made. Remember, he was coming off 4 first-round knockouts before fighting the rematch with Stipe. And an improved Francis Ngannou was incredible. He could stop a takedown. Timing on his kicks were good. Timing on his punches were good. He wasn't looking for one shot. He had learned so much from Eric Nicksick in the gym that it had kind of brought it all together, and you went, oh my God, this guy's frightening. It sucks from a fan perspective that he left the UFC when he did, arguably at the height of his powers after the Cyril Gane win. Has only fought once in PFL. He left the UFC in 2022. He's fought once. Renan Ferreira, cooked him in round number 1. So we'll see if he has a chance to fight more, right? But man, Francis Ngannou, unbelievably intimidating in his day. That's my list, my short list. There are a lot more I could put on here. I only have so much time. Of most feared fighters in MMA history. Let me know in the comment section who I missed, who you would put on the list. Appreciate you. Give me a like and subscribe. I'll talk to you soon.